U.S. wheat production is estimated at 1.8 billion bushels for 1988-89, down 14% from last year. Total supply is forecast at 3.1 billion bushels. Because of these figures, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has estimated that only 1 million tons of U.S. wheat will be available for foreign emergency food aid programs, namely PL-480 shipments. The program needs 4 million tons. With us today to talk about PL-480 is Chris Gothwaite with USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service. Chris, what options are being explored at this time to meet the obligations of PL-480?
Well, in a normal year, most all of our obligations are met through normal commercial channels, and the 1 million tons you've mentioned represents the estimate of ready availability from those channels. This year we're looking at a number of other possibilities to meet the need for wheat, which is the chief commodity programmed under PL-480. We're looking at alternative commodities for some of the needs where countries can use wheat or perhaps some other commodity. We're looking at, as well at taking some of the needs from the Food Security Wheat Reserve.
Now, if it is decided to release wheat from the wheat reserve, what does that involve?
It involves several steps. First of all, an interagency procedure to make the decision, or I should say to make a recommendation to the President, and the ultimate decision is left with him to decide whether or not to tap the reserve, and then there would be some study of implementation procedures.
Will it be used for other food aid as well?
No, it would be used only for PL-480.
Now, has the Food Security Reserve been used for something like this before?
It was used to a very small degree several years ago, I think up to about 300,000 tons.
Chris, what's the possibility of using commercial stocks to supply the programs?
In fact, if we do tap the reserve, we still expect to rely heavily on commercial stocks to some degree. And there is probably enough availability. Obviously, this will depend a little bit on what the new crop looks like and this kind of thing. But I don't doubt but which we'll be able to meet all of our needs one way or another.
When will the decision be made?
We're hoping that we will have a decision very shortly, I would guess perhaps within several days.
As of Wednesday, October 26, President Reagan approved release of up to 1.5 million metric tons of U.S. wheat from the Food Security Wheat Reserve. The release will help to meet a shortfall in the Food for Peace program that aids developing nations. In Washington, I'm Deborah Jennifer reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is releasing 50 million sterile Medflies in a 53-square-mile area of Culver City, California, to combat an infestation of Mediterranean fruit flies. The action follows the discovery of Medflies and Medfly larvae in the Culver City area since late September.
The current infestation we're dealing with is in the Culver City area of Los Angeles, involves portions of Hollywood. We originally found one fly, I believe, on a Wednesday. Over the following weekend, we picked up an additional 35 flies and also found larvae. Very unusual for us to find larvae in an infestation like this.
The Medfly is one of the world's most destructive pests of fruits and vegetables. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service is cooperating with the California Department of Food and Agriculture in a Medfly eradication program. Millions of sexually sterilized Medflies reared in a special laboratory in Hawaii have been released each week, and more than 2,500 traps have been placed.
The sterile flies are released both by aircraft and by ground equipment. Right now, we're releasing about 50 million flies a week, I believe, and about 60% of those are being released by ground, the other 40% by aircraft, over about a 35-square-mile area there.
This is the second infestation of Medflies in California this year. In July and August, 6 Medflies were discovered in the North Ridge area of Los Angeles County. The last sterile release in the North Ridge area was October 4th, and USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service continues to cooperate with Los Angeles County to complete this eradication project. A 62-square-mile area of Los Angeles County remains under quarantine because of the earlier Medfly project. In a related action, APHIS is now placing a 76-square-mile area around Culver City under federal quarantine.
We have to regulate the movement of all host material within the quarantine area, and this is primarily oranges or whatever that may be grown in backyards.
The new 76-square-mile area is to prevent further spread of the fruit flies and to restrict interstate movement of fruits and vegetables from infested areas. Fruits and vegetables cannot be moved from the quarantine area unless they are accompanied by a certificate or limited permit.
Medfly has the greatest host range of any of the fruit flies. In other words, there are about 250 fruits and vegetables that it's known to attack. There are two impacts of a Medfly infestation. Number one is nobody wants to eat wormy fruit, and so it becomes an economic and a production problem. Secondly, and perhaps as important, is the impact on our domestic and foreign trade, and that product moving throughout the United States or moving to Japan or other countries that don't have the Medfly. So it becomes a regulatory problem as well as an economic problem.
In Washington, I'm Deborah Janifer reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's Federal Grain Inspection Service recently announced that it would begin a comparison study of aflatoxin test procedures and equipment. Aflatoxin, a chemical that is derived when a certain mold grows on grain or peanuts, has been detected in some of the corn crop as a result of this year's drought. With us today to talk about the comparison study is Dr. Kenneth Gillis, Assistant Secretary for Marketing and Inspection Services. Dr. Gillis, why is this comparison study being scheduled?
Well, the Federal Grain Inspection Service, like other agencies in the department, is always looking for better ways to do things. The official method that they're using now has been approved by the Official Agricultural Chemists Group and by the American Association of Cereal Chemists, and it's been in use for a number of years. It's accurate, it's a bit time-consuming, so they're looking for methods that are more timely, hopefully increase the accuracy, and that can be used more conveniently. And the technology keeps changing, so there are some new ideas that have been presented.
Now, some of our foreign customers have expressed concerns about the high levels of aflatoxin in our corn crop. How will the study on U.S. procedures and equipment help to ease their concerns?
Well, quite obviously the buyers want to make sure that the most modern technology is used. But I think that the concern has really been enhanced more by stories that have appeared in the American press. And perhaps they've been a bit more sensational than facts would warrant at the present time. But our foreign buyers obviously read our newspapers, and when a concern is raised, they respond.
When will the comparison study be concluded?
Well, it'll take a couple of months. The Federal Grain Inspection Service has called the manufacturers of various pieces of equipment together, and they will write a protocol which they'll all agree on. These are the right parameters. So it will be a few months before the test will be completed. But in the meantime, the official method that has been used for a number of years will continue to be used.
Now, aflatoxin testing is currently a voluntary procedure. Will this change as a result of the recent problem?
No, because the mold that causes this aflatoxin is called Aspergillus flavus, and it's with us throughout the universe and environment. But in certain years, like this past year, when there are drought problems, it tends to grow more prolifically. We are encouraging people, if there's any concern, to stipulate that they would like to have the test performed in the contract that they use when they buy the grain. So the facilities are here that can be used, but you see in a year in which there is no evidence of any aflatoxin problems, it would simply be an additional cost to run the test needlessly.
Dr. Gillis, how can those wishing to have their products tested get more information?
Well, I think their first point of contact should be the local extension service, and then they can inquire to the Federal Grain Inspection Service or any of the private chemical laboratories that may be nearby.
Assistant Secretary Dr. Kenneth Gillis. In Washington, I'm Deboria Jennifer reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. time, the United States government is rejecting a petition by the U.S. rice industry concerning unfair trade practices by the Japanese. At a Washington news conference, U.S. Trade Representative Clayton Yiter announced his decision.
I'm outlining a course of action with respect to Japan's rice policies, which I believe will be more effective than a 301 case in opening up Japan's rice market to U.S. exports. I'm also putting Japan on notice that if it does not permit progress on this issue at a critical trade ministers meeting in December, I will invite an immediate resubmission of this petition. When a similar complaint was filed 2 years ago, I indicated that I was sympathetic to the concerns of the Rice Millers Association, and I still am. Japan's rice program is indefensible. It adversely affects not only our rice producers, but those of other countries as well. The present situation is intolerable, and the Japanese program must be vigorously challenged. There can be no debate on that point. The relevant question is how that can best be done. What action on our part is most likely to be successful in truly opening the Japanese market? That's the bottom line for our rice farmers. I concluded 2 years ago that attempting to eliminate Japan's import restrictions on rice through the Uruguay round of multilateral trade negotiations was more likely to be successful than a Section 301 case, and I still believe that to be the case. Our rice producers contend that little has been accomplished on agriculture so far in the Uruguay round, and they're correct. But we are still in the preliminary skirmishes of this negotiation, which is not scheduled to conclude until 1990, 2 years from now. Acceptance of the Section 301 complaint would trigger a GATT dispute settlement process, which would probably consume a full year. In my judgment, we would win the GATT case, but we might lose the ultimate objective of the case, market access. I will not accept arguments in Montreal that, quote, basic foodstuffs, end quote, should be exempt from market access rules in agriculture, or that Japan cannot accede to short-term measures that might be agreed upon as a down payment on long-term reform. I will expect Japan to assert its willingness to negotiate and implement, in cooperation with its trading partners, long overdue reforms and policies affecting agricultural trade. If, on the other hand, representatives of the government of Japan are not helpful and supportive in the agricultural discussions in Montreal, and if it becomes apparent that they are not committed to solving the rice issue in the Uruguay round, I am prepared to reconsider this decision, and I will entertain an immediate resubmission of the Section 301 petition. Should that be necessary, and I assuredly hope that it will not be, I will make a decision on the petition before the conclusion of the Reagan administration.
The midterm review on the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade begins in Montreal on December 5th. At this time, Japan will have the opportunity to fulfill its commitment to resolve the rice issue. In Washington, I'm Deborah Janifer reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Some farmers and ranchers practice conservation, others do not. Program planners need to know why before suggesting incentives to encourage participation.
It's been kind of a frightful thing for the farmers to have to deal with. They feel like they're being told how to farm and what to do, and that's not really the case. And it's been kind of our role to explain that in so they don't feel like it's that way.
Farmers are hearing more and more about the importance of getting their land to comply with the regulations of the 1985 Food Security Act. And as the deadline gets closer, district conservationists are searching for the right ingredient to encourage that compliance.
I think initially farmers were very resistant to the idea because it was brand new that suddenly they had to be doing conservation on their land in order to receive farm program benefits. What surprised many of them was that what they were already doing in terms of conservation was adequate to meet those requirements. And I find that as we were able to deal with alternative conservation systems and talk with the farmers, that they have become much less resistant, and many of them are supportive of the Food Security Act.
In Morrill County, Oregon, alternative conservation systems have been the positive force to move farmers into complying with federal regulations.
If we didn't have this type of alternative or a special area that we designed for this county, I think people would be looking at a different view at it. To maintain the 2T level with this highly erodible land, the soil depth that we have, the type of soils that we have, the wind conditions that we have, it would be almost impossible to meet that type of tolerance. The basic thing that they have to look at is to maintain a mulching system. That's probably the #1 priority in our area. Now, different counties will be a little different. So for our area, we have to start with the mulching, and that is to keep as much of this straw that you see here on the ground as possible.
Farmers in this area have been concerned about soil erosion long before the Food Security Act developed the compliance provision. A special project known as the Agricultural Conservation Program, or ACP, has been in existence since the early 80s.
The ACP Special Project, which began in the early 80s and consisted of a group of about 25 farmers in one area, Jordan Valley, that came together and said, we have some serious erosion problems here and we need to work together to solve them, because it doesn't help to have the farmer at the bottom of the slope do something if the farmer up above him doesn't. And they wanted to all work together and plan their systems so that they would reduce the erosion and make it practical to keep farming.
Every farmer is a conservationist, or they wouldn't be farming. We know that we got to take care of our ground, and have somebody come in and tell us, okay, you got to start taking care of your ground, is kind of a slap in the face, and it's not really that way. And so it's been kind of a hard pill to swallow, but it's workable, and I think people are coming around. And if we want to maintain our benefits and our payments, those are the strings that are attached, but they're good strings.
In Eastern Oregon, I'm Deborah Jennifer reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
From Washington, here's Agriculture Update. Reporting for USDA, Eric Parsons.
Eligible tree farmers may be reimbursed for qualifying losses of seedlings killed by this year's drought. For an explanation of the Tree Assistance Program, we talked with Rex Wright of the Agricultural Stabilization and Conservation Service.
Payments will be made under the Tree Assistance Program to replant these tree seedlings that were lost due to the drought and they must be trees that were planted in 1987 and 1988 for commercial purposes. The trees that are covered under the tree assistance program include those that were planted for wood production, wood products, fruit, nuts, syrup, and similar products, including Christmas trees that were planted and grown for harvest. In order to qualify for the tree assistance program, drought loss of eligible tree seedlings on an individual stand must be more than 35% adjusted for normal mortality. Reimbursement will be made for 65% of the cost replanting that portion of the adjusted loss, which exceeds 35%. Cost sharing is authorized for new seedlings, site preparation, the planting process, and any necessary pesticides and nutrients that are required in order to ensure adequate restocking. Payments may only be made to the owner of the trees with 1,000 acres or less of trees that are for commercial purposes and who have less than $2 million annually in gross revenues. Requests for cost share assistance to reestablish these tree seedlings under the program are being accepted right now in our county ASCS offices and will be available through June 30th at the eligible county ASCS offices.
Drought relief is also available to eligible livestock producers under the Forage Assistance Program. Again, we called in Rex Wright of ASCS for the details.
Eligible livestock producers whose established pastures were damaged by the drought or related conditions in 1988 may qualify for a maximum of $3,500 payment under a cost-sharing program to reseed these pastures that were lost due to the drought. The Forage Assistance Program was authorized by the Disaster Assistance Act of 1988, and this provides cost-share assistance of up to 50% of the cost of reseeding the pastures, and this includes the cost of the seed, the fertilizer, and other inputs that are necessary and required for the reestablishment of the pasture. The program is to aid livestock producers in reseeding their permanent forage crops on established acreage pastures and to facilitate late fall 1988 and early 1989 grazing. Counties in which the producers will be eligible for the Forage Assistance Program are those that are declared eligible by USDA for other emergency-type programs. Established pasture means land, including rangeland, in permanent vegetative cover that is used exclusively for grazing by livestock. Forage Assistance Program cost sharing will be provided only if the forage crop will not regenerate naturally on its own, and reseeding is the most cost-effective method of reestablishing the pasture. Hayland is not eligible under the program and cannot be used simply to improve the forage crops that were damaged by the drought. Cost sharing is authorized for reseeding only if the reseeding is to a non-annual seed that is planted for pasture purposes. Requests for cost share assistance to reestablish pastures under the program are now being accepted at county ASCS offices and will be accepted through May 15th of next year.
I'm Eric Parsons with the Department of Agriculture in Washington, and that's Agriculture Update.